The monitors had gone quiet. The room had settled into a stillness that only exists when everyone present has surrendered to the finality of a situation. A man pressed against the wall gripped his shirt over his mouth, while a senior physician gestured toward the door. A nurse knelt, her gaze fixed on the floor. The infant had ceased breathing minutes prior, and every measure to revive him had crumbled into futility. Then a small figure in a torn gray shirt slipped through the doorway. At first, no one registered him. 11 years old, slight for his years, with mud-splattered shoes and the hushed presence of someone accustomed to fading into backgrounds. He trailed the ambulance on foot for 3 blocks, drawn by the father's desperate sprint and something deeper that urged him forward. He reached the sink before anyone could halt him. In the 60 seconds that followed, his actions would ripple through that hospital for years. Before proceeding, if you believe courage transcends address and compassion defies uniform, consider liking this video, subscribing to WhatsApp Kindness Tales, and sharing this with someone who still needs to trust in humanity. Kyle was 11. For 8 months, he'd lived without a fixed home, shuttling between a church shelter that locked its doors at 7 and a makeshift sanctuary under an overpass, where concrete served as a ceiling and cardboard formed his bed. His backpack held 3 possessions: a fresh pair of socks, a faded photograph of his mother, and a worn book on human anatomy, its spine split from countless readings at a clinic donation bin 2 years prior. That book mattered. Remember it. Kyle had been fascinated by medicine since age 6, when his sister stopped breathing during an allergic reaction, and a paramedic returned her to the world with steady hands and precise actions that seemed, to him, the pinnacle of human capability. He'd resolved then to understand the body's mysteries, its vulnerabilities, and its remedies. Without formal schooling or a valid library card, he scavenged knowledge wherever he could, donated pamphlets, discarded textbooks, and that single precious book whose chapter on infant emergencies detailed clearing an airway after water inhalation. He'd never expected to need it. His mornings unfolded similarly, sitting near a park's entrance, nibbling a saved granola bar, observing the city stir. He noticed the suited man first, running with an urgency unseen in men of his kind, driven by an emergency so primal he ignored the world around him. He followed, 3 blocks to the hospital. By the time Kyle arrived, the father had already been ushered inside. He slipped through the sliding doors behind a family and pursued the chaos down a corridor, through swinging doors, until he stepped into the room as a physician declared the infant's fate. 8-month-old Garrison Vale's son had been found unresponsive, likely having aspirated fluid while in a tilted bouncy seat. 40 minutes had passed before the father discovered him. 4 minutes of resuscitation efforts had yielded nothing. The father, a wealthy investment firm founder accustomed to solving every problem with resources, stood broken against the wall. Then Kyle knelt at the sink. Kyle saw what others missed, a fleeting finger twitch. Without hesitation, he lifted the infant, positioning him under the cool stream as the book instructed, supporting the head and neck, angling the body to use gravity's aid. The physician shouted. That is when the man in the suit demanded, "What are you doing?" The nurse advanced. Kyle held his ground. "Please just give me 1 minute," he murmured, not turning. His voice carried a quiet resolve born of 2 years studying that single chapter in his concrete refuge, driven by a fascination with the human body and the unassailable power of knowledge. 40 seconds stretched. Then the baby coughed, then cried. The room erupted into controlled chaos, doctors sprinting, monitors reconnected, the nurse frozen with a hand over her heart. Garrison Vale collapsed to the floor, his sobs raw and unrecognizable as either grief or relief. Kyle placed the infant on the examination table, retrieved his backpack, and moved toward the hallway when Garrison called, "Wait." The story's true measure lay not in the rescue but in the unseen hands that had prepared it. 2 years prior, a volunteer named Dorothy had left a box of donated books outside a clinic, not sorting them but unable to discard them. That morning, Kyle found the box at dawn, taking the anatomy book. A retired paramedic named Harold held informal first aid sessions at the shelter every second Sunday, teaching airway techniques without inquiry into one's circumstances. Kyle attended repeatedly, absorbing Harold's lessons on infant resuscitation. A shelter supervisor, Irene, never locked the door on cold mornings, ensuring Kyle stayed warm until closing. None were in that room, yet all were. Their quiet acts of decency had converged in that moment. Garrison found Kyle in the corridor, his face streaked with tears and sweat, and asked where he lived. Instead of pity, Garrison inquired, "What do you want to do with your life? And what do you need to do it?" Their agreement was not charity but investment, a recognition of potential nurtured through opportunity. Kyle enrolled in school within weeks, moving into a home supported by Garrison's foundation, where the front door stayed open for visitors. He received tutoring, a library card, a winter coat, and permission to keep the spine-splitting book. 4 years later, he excelled in science, presenting at a medical symposium at 14 as the youngest participant. Physicians later noted his questions were the most incisive of the day. Garrison's son, now 5, called him by a term that captured his essence, the one who stayed when others retreated. The night before high school began, Kyle wrote letters, not to benefactors, but to Dorothy, Harold, and Irene. Dorothy wept for 20 minutes after reading his account, then called her sister to hear it again. Harold replied on yellowed paper, his first inkling of the outcome in 11 years of teaching. Irene never wrote back, but framed Kyle's letter above the door she still left unlocked each morning. Never dismiss a person's worth by their nightly resting place. Never assume emptiness behind quiet steps or worn shoes. And never forget that the knowledge which saves a life may reside in a box abandoned on a sidewalk by someone who simply could not bring herself to discard a book. If this story stirs your heart, like the video, comment, and share it with someone who needs to believe in people today. Subscribe to Kindness Tales for more tales of courage, resilience, and the small, profound decisions that reshape destinies. Because kindness rarely wears a white coat. Sometimes it wears a torn gray shirt and carries a book with a broken spine, staying when everyone else has stepped away. Welcome to Kindness Tales. We're honored you're here.